Hi, I'm Brian. This is Autogefuel, and this is the brand new AMG A45. Let's go. There it is. Yes! Look at these creases right into the top. They state that they mean business before you even get down to the lower third, and that's really where the muscle's all been put on this car. Now, if you remember the last generation, we had a Starburst grille. Here we have the Pan America that has become so popular from so many other models. I think it's strident and bold on the A45. Yes, it's a very big front visually. There's an awful lot happening here. There are big, bold statements that have been made right throughout. But when you consider what this car is packing underneath this domed bonnet, well, I think it's a reasonable first statement to be making. These are custom 19-inch rims. Really nice. I think they set the car off very well. But this is what we really want to be looking at. A 6-caliper disc brake. That gives you some indication of just how they're going to try and tame this wild beast once we get to driving it. If you look down at the lower fairing, there are some subtle but definitely stated styling details that just keep that sporty feel carrying on right through the lines of the car. If you follow the way that the roofline sweeps through to the back, the eye is drawn to this muscular lower third, and again these 19-inch rims, and of course significantly smaller calipers. Come on, that's the back. We don't need to worry about that in quite the same way. And then everything swoops around into this really nice discreet spoiler at the rear, and of course the back. Round at the back now, and I'm going to get just a little bit controversial here. Yes, I am well aware quite how much everybody hates fake exhaust pipes, and here we have 4 chrome-clad whoppers. If you have a look through here, you'll see that there is in fact just one exhaust port per side. So, completely unnecessary, complete overkill. But I encourage you to think as you look at the rear of this car has more power per litre than any other standard production car in its class. Well, if the outside of this car is a beauty, let's take a look at the beast that's powering it all. Jonas said, "You've shut it again." He was right, I did. Well, if Jonas comes in and gives you a close-up of that, I think you can agree they really haven't wasted a square inch of space in there. What you're looking at is a 2-litre 4-cylinder engine that somewhat improbably produces 421 horsepower, 500 newton meters of torque. That gives it a 0 to 62 or 0 to 100 speed of 3.9 seconds and a top speed of 270 kilometers per hour. So here's the key, and as you can see, it's not exactly a revolution from what went before, and I have a feeling that that might speak volumes about what happens inside. Well, I don't think there were too many complaints about the styling from the previous A45, so really not radical reason to change. And as you can see from your first glance inside this car, conservative is the name of the game. All of the emphasis here is on comfort, sports and style. This car is set absolutely perfectly for me to drive, so as you can see from my spacious headroom here, if you're up to about 6'1" in height, this is what you will experience. So for a compact car, really nice to find the right amount of space for you to really feel at home. So the seat adjustments, as in common with lots of other Mercedes, are to be found embedded in the door, and as you can see, we have a memory function, so up to 3 different people can have the car perfectly set for them when they want to use it. So that's first impressions. What happens once you actually get settled into the car? Well, Jonas is going to come round so we can take a closer look. Well, there are lots of things to show you in here, and they all start with the push of this excellent start button. Well, first thing to talk about is clearly this display, and you have to give Mercedes some credit. It may have taken them a while to get on board with the idea of a touchscreen, but once they did, they certainly didn't waste any time into integrating something that looks really visually very impressive indeed. Here we have a driver's display and of course the infotainment / sat-nav display, and they are very highly modifiable. If I go through a few of the different options that I have available here, you can see that I can change what is displayed on the central display. Not only that, but if I use my central console, then I can also change, he said optimistically, there we are. And you can see there are always lots of different ways of interacting with the system. So here we are, styles and displays. Now clearly there are so many different options here. You are hardly about to want to get involved in doing all of these things while you're out on the road. So the driver system is nicely set that you can really only handle the basic configuration via the steering wheel. If you want more detail than that, you actually have to start digging into some menus. These will be very familiar to any modern Mercedes user. I have to tell you, if you are not used to the modern Mercedes interface, these do take a little bit of getting used to, but they do reward your patience. So once you get the feel for where everything is, it all feels very ergonomic, very tactile and very nice to use. Now I have to say that is in contrast to these control knobs here. These are recent add-ins, and if you can see the little bit of movement I'm able to get on both of those, they just don't quite resonate with the quality that I would like and expect from this vehicle. Now this mode switch dial actually feels nice and solid to use while you're driving. I just maybe would have preferred a different material selection. Coming slightly further down, we have an inductive charging pad for mobile phones, and if you can see the size of that, it's comfortably capable of taking one of the larger models, so you have more than enough room to future-proof your charging. There's also a USB-C charge point and car interface just here, and then 2 cup holders here, which have these nice feature buttons, so your cup will stay in its right place irrespective of the size. Now I'm a big fan of these. I know it's not new for Mercedes, but I always felt that they really utilized the software of these touchpads particularly well. This is a very nice natural place for your palm to rest, and in conjunction with the haptic feedback that it provides, you really can get a very good control over the car systems without needing to look at it, and I find that very helpful indeed. Well, we know how much of the available space the engine took up, but can you actually fit real human beings back here? Is it a practical car to own and use? Well, let's take a closer look and find out. So again, I'm 5'10" or 178 centimeters. And I have more than ample headspace back here. Look at that. Okay, it's nothing to write a book about, but given the profile and type of car, I could happily go on a longer drive in this. This, however, could be a problem. I do have particularly short legs, and this car seat is set for me, so I don't have huge amounts of knee room here. I'm slightly intrigued to see how a person with larger legs would get on. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to come out of the car and take the camera from Jonas. So now you can see realistically how it is. Jonas, what's your height?
1 meter 93.
1 meter 93. How far realistically could you travel in the back of that car?
It's okay.
Okay, so it's cozy.
It's okay.
We'll give it. What do you think? A 3.5 out of 5. Yeah, that sounds good. What Mercedes have done with this design is they have tried to use ergonomic styling on this seat to provide as much realistic leg space as they can. So they have used the space really well, and I'm very happy to see that the material selection back here has been as carefully thought out as it has in the front of the car. The two main things that have changed about this car are the pure power and the dynamic. Let's not forget, this car delivers more power per litre than any standard production car. Sure, you can get it from supercars, but that's not what this is. This is a very hot hatch indeed. Now, as far as the handling is concerned, the rear torque vectoring is something that you just have to experience. It's extraordinary how much power you can carry both into turns and immediately out of them as well. Now, obviously, we're never going to get quite as much time to have fun on the race course as we would like, but in just a short amount of time, it really is phenomenal how much you can get out of this car without ever feeling that you're losing your edge or the control. So, we've got a nice uphill section here, which means we can really pour on some power. And as we come in for a hard straight line brake, just towards this next turn, here we are. You can see just how poised that delivery is. I'm really going to put the power on. You can hear the tyres going, but there's no point at which I'm ever at risk of losing traction completely. That's remarkable. Well, you're not going to get to drive every day like this in a car like this, but any day that you do is going to be a good one. Yes! Okay, so clearly not everybody's lucky enough to have a racetrack in their own back garden. So you're going to be spending most of your time with the A45 just driving around regular streets. Well, I don't think anybody could really accuse these of being regular streets. We're in the foothills up above Madrid. And whilst the driving conditions here are excellent, I have to tell you that the speed restrictions are fairly demanding as well. So this is a really nice opportunity to talk a little bit about what this car can deliver in regular day-to-day driving. The first thing to note, obviously, is the seating position. I'm a big fan of these bucket seats. I'm not completely convinced about some of the styling detail, but I have to tell you, they do a really nice balanced job of holding you very well for that sporty, dynamic driving and giving you plenty of comfort and support for day-to-day use, whilst being nice and easy to get in and out of. Some bucket seats for sports cars are obviously a little bit challenging when it comes time to pop in and out to the shops. These ones hit that balance point really nicely indeed. Driving position, excellent. I've got really good all-round visibility. I have to tell you that B-pillar is pretty large, but you do get enough glass behind it to get a good sense of everything that's going on. Road position itself is excellent. You have just the right balance between depth in the vehicle and also height on the road. So even though I'm in a small, slightly lower car, I don't feel that way at all. It's a very dynamic driving position, and that's clearly aided not only by the seat but also by the presentation of the steering wheel. Now, I do have some challenges about certain aspects of this steering wheel, but the one thing I do not have any challenges on is the way that it feels, looks and behaves in its simplest form. The weight of the car is really nicely delivered here. It's subtle enough and lively enough to make you think that it's not a real beast, but you feel the weight. The power steering is very nicely delivered in day-to-day use, so it gives you a feeling of solid driving, I would say, and it feels great under the hand, so really nicely put together and nicely delivered. Now, if you're familiar with a modern Mercedes experience, you'll be aware that they don't just go for one way of delivering an experience to you. They have at least 3 different ways of achieving almost anything you could want to mess around with while you're driving. And there are more than enough whistles and bells on this car to keep you entertained for a good amount of time. As a first-time user, you might find all of that technology a little bit overwhelming in terms of managing to adjust the particular thing you want to get to while you're using the car, but it actually turns out to be quite intuitive once you start digging around the systems, and you'll find your own particular way of accessing the bits that you want. Hey Mercedes, what's my current fuel economy?
Your average consumption since the start of the journey is 11.9 litres per 100 kilometres, and since the last reset, 11.9 litres per 100 kilometres.
Well, Jonas was out by 0.5 of a litre. I didn't think he was really that accurate to begin with. 11.9 litres. Well, if you've seen the published figures for this car, I'm pretty sure, as I did, you had a bit of a chuckle to yourself as you contemplated how likely it was that anyone would ever be achieving them. I think, honestly, real-world usage for this car has it coming in at around about 11 to 12. I mean, possibly even higher. It really does depend how you drive it, but clearly the point of this car is to be driven, and to be driven hard. Because otherwise, what on earth are you buying this particular version of this car for? There are much more efficient, much more polite, gentle, easygoing versions of the car. But if you want to have the fun that this car can deliver, well, then you probably should look into acquiring a petrol station as well. The only reason to buy either the A45 or this CLA is because you absolutely have to have the most power that it is possible to fit into this smaller chassis. The last time I drove an A45, I was blown away by how much power they've managed to squeeze into it, but also how much fun it was to drive. What's changed significantly since then is the amount of technology and the way in which it's applied to the car. Not only is this now an unbelievably even more powerful car than it was previously, but it's also possible to get more of that power out of the driving experience. How? Well, that rear differential is something else when it comes down to how you can get the power through those bends and out again. That said, neither one of these cars are cheap. You're going to be looking north of 50,000 even just to get a foot in the door, and that is a huge amount of money to be spending. At that price point, it's really essential that you get exactly what you want. Whether or not it makes sense to put this kind of power into this kind of car, it's inarguable that Mercedes really have achieved something quite extraordinary with it. So I guess the question really lands with you. Is it that important to you to have the most powerful car of its type on the road? If it is, then the money is probably going to be inconsequential. You can have just as much fun driving much cheaper versions of this car that still give you all kinds of driving excitement, but they won't be this car. So, at the end of the day, is it a crazy idea that Mercedes made this? Well, a lot of people said that last time, but then they sold an awful lot more units than anybody thought that they would. So when it comes to this car, I'm loath to write it off as saying it's just a crazy experiment as to how much you can cram into a small chassis. I think this is going to be wildly popular with a small segment of the A-Class market. And in terms of an engineering achievement, it is unbelievable to experience just what can be achieved When people take the brakes off and they say to the engineers, you know what, just give me everything you've got. That is what you experience with these cars. Well, I hope you've enjoyed watching. Thank you very much for tuning in. Please subscribe. If you have any comments or questions, please pop them below, and we hope we'll see you again soon.